What is up, everybody? This is Alex from IHE TV. Or should I say IHE Scary? Because there's a new horror movie that everyone's talking about, everyone's seeing. And you know what? It's fire. It's really good. Been a little bit spoiled this year. 28 years later, bring her back, Sinners. I enjoyed Companion quite a lot, but this might be one of my favorites. But this one is growing on me. It's getting better in my head the more I'm thinking about it. This is written and directed by Zach Kreger, who also released the enjoyable Barbarian. That's the only other thing of his that I've seen. And I saw a lot of potential in him after watching Barbarian, and Weapons is basically an improvement in every single way. From a plot level, character level, presentation level. I feel like the more horror movies I see, the more familiar with the genre I get, and I've been watching horror movies for decades now. The big things I'm looking for is some way of being able to maintain attention or mystery and find that mysterious, difficult balance of building up a satisfying narrative without completely shattering the mystery when you start giving answers, because you have to give some form of answer, give some, whether it be small hints or full-on reveals. You need something to keep the audience interested. But I find for so many horror movies that start out strong, like a Longlegs or a Babadook, they so often reach a point where everything fractures, splinters, and I just stop finding it scary. One of the great things about this movie is how it rides this tone. A self-aware goofiness, knows when to switch it up. It will go from being quite funny to then showing you the scariest thing you've ever seen. I'll put my hands up and say I'm fairly easy to scare, but there's some stuff with the timing, especially, with how this confident camera work will just let a shot linger, utilizing sound design really well, leaving it lots of silences, drawing things out just enough. The timing of it, as I say, is really good. I gotta admit, at first, it took a little while to get me hooked, to get me going. It does have a good overall hook. The children of a town just disappearing, aside from one little boy, and everyone kind of instinctually blaming the teacher, thinking she must have something to do with it. That is so intriguing. And for probably about 75% of the movie, I was wondering, how are they going to pull this off? Make it satisfying? Because it is quite ambitious, mostly in its structure. And that's kind of what took me that initial moment of time to get into it. The perspective character does shift throughout the movie, but in a way that doesn't feel sporadic or random or too big and broad. It does still feel like every time a character perspective is switched, it does have a good plot or narrative reason for doing so. Seeing the same scene from a different angle, fleshing it out in a different way, characterizing someone and giving them a bit of depth, and manages to maintain it being interesting, and does wind up looping back on itself. One of the big mysteries is obviously, what type of horror are we dealing with here? Is it aliens? Is it a cursed item? Is there nothing supernatural at all? Science explanation. And I won't spoil that quite yet, but the reason the kind of reveals worked for me is with that tonal self-awareness that is straddling this razor's edge of going too far. Because once you've broken it, you can't really make it scary or funny again. It's quite a difficult tone to master or pinpoint. And yeah, I think that probably is my biggest issue with the movie, is simply just the pace. It's quite long. Feels it at points, but I was never bored in particular. I just couldn't help but feel like, please don't drop the ball, please don't drop the ball. I'm really enjoying this. I really want to see where this goes. I hope it stays interesting. But I think it's always a good sign when, on your first watch, you're already thinking about when you want to see it again. I'm quite tempted to, because I'm sure there's stuff you missed. Well, it just always flows better on a rewatch, if the film's, good enough, and I feel like this one is. The Naruto running is quite funny. Some great dream sequence stuff. I think this is the first time I've had a woman, scream in my theater, at one of the scares. She properly screamed. And the last thing I'll say before shifting into a couple spoilers is that the conclusion is really good. Really satisfying and silly, but also gruesome. Does wrap up pretty quick, but I felt satisfied. So just a little spoiler section at the end here. I'm not going to linger too much in this video because I think I'm going to talk about this on Sardonicast in more detail. But yeah, the big reveal that the real horror in the movie is coming from a witch, which does make sense, and there is a through line thinking after the fact, with the whole Josh Brolin painting Julia Garner's car with the word witch, when Wong and his, can't remember if they were boyfriend or husband, are watching a nature documentary, and it's the cordyceps virus, known for how it kind of takes over and controls another living being. And the same thing where Julia Garner was teaching some biology class about a type of parasite or something. I can't remember the exact one she mentioned. Nice foreshadowing there. And I'm glad they found that balance of how much to leave open and how much to leave to interpretation. Even though they reveal that it is a witch that is doing this, what she really wants to achieve and the exact mechanics of how she does what she does is more kind of implied, which does keep it creepy. You need to have some level of mystery or these big question marks that don't get answered too much to keep it scary. Because I was a little bit thrown off at first when the opening narration has the little girl talking and almost spoils that the case doesn't get solved, which just added another question for me, is how how are they going to make this feel satisfying? Because a big part of it is this kind of detective, investigative type nature with Julia Garner and Josh Brolin from their own different angles. One as a teacher and one as a parent of one of the kids, trying to find answers to what happened with the disappearances. One of my favorite kind of narrative structures is when you have someone investigating something, following clues, procedural kind of dynamics. Yeah, the shot I was getting at earlier that was probably the scariest for me was when Julia Garner was watching the creepy house with the boarded up windows, falls asleep, and there's the whole achingly long shot of the front door opening and the woman with the scissors coming out. And the door just opens and there's this blackness in the door frame. And the way they move when they're kind of being controlled by the witch, really freaky, like a puppet human, very like uncanny valley type stuff. And the fact that the scene ends without her even knowing makes it all the creepier. I thought the music was extremely low key and almost like a ambient video gamey in like a really good way. Not overbearing, adds to the scares, highlighted the scares. Amy Madigan as this Gladys witch was a really fun, weird, kind of campy character, hamming it up in like the best of ways to sell this freaky witch and her strange routines. And the teasers of her throughout the movie, they got me every time. And her weird disguise that's so like, reminds me of like that creepy Roald Dahl witches movie. There's just something wrong about it. Very curious to know what people think of the dream sequence, the Josh Brolin one specifically, where he sees this enormous gun in the sky and a digital clock appears on the side of it saying 2:17. Which I think is the time that the kids all left at night. Again, it's left pretty open as to what that means to you. I just found it interesting how, without any words being spoken, I just immediately thought of like school shootings just because of the framing of the story, like being a teacher and a class of students going missing, and this abused kid like at the heart of it. I know that the film isn't explicitly about that, but the fact that I even made that connection just from a single image is kind of telling in and of itself and sad. Great little touches and details to keep scenes interesting. I love that shot of this character played by Austin Abrams, who's a drug addict and he's on the phone to somebody at quite a low angle. They're showing off all these car doors and he's just trying to open every single door throughout the, must have been a couple minutes long shot. Love that intentional blocking, that thoughtfulness to it. And whenever it would feel like it's straying too far from the missing children hook and question, feel like it would loop back into itself just before it was getting too out of reach. And finally, yeah, the payoff of the abused little kid getting revenge on the witch by using her own spell against her, having the very kids she kidnapped be the ones to rip her apart and eat her alive. Veering way more into like a Sam Raimi-esque comedy horror type thing. And it's played for humor. The myriad shots of all the kids jumping through glass, chasing this old witch is funny. And the reactions of the people in the town are really funny too. And the dramatic irony of that is awesome. Super satisfying. Even though, they all would have died from jumping through so many panels of glass. But there's a certain point where the buy-in, where the disbelief is kind of established and just makes sense with the excellent scene where Amy Madigan shows up at Wong's house. And this perspective character switching just gives it the excuse to maintain this huge question mark and basically edge you along each time you get a new character switch. So many films are obsessed with these big, grand, multiple character perspective narratives. Magnolia, Cloud Atlas, Crash. But most of them struggle to make it cohesive or have at least one little weak link, but I didn't feel that here. It's not quite a Magnolia, but I don't know, I'd happily watch this again. This was a strong 3.5 star, maybe could go up on a rewatch. But as I say, there were a couple pacing things there. It does wrap up very fast and clean after the humorous kid stuff. But yeah, horror fans were eating good this year. And there's still a couple more yet to come, I think, so let me know what you thought of Weapons. I think this dude is signed on to do a Resident Evil movie next. It'd be nice to get like a genuinely good one. Yeah, there it is, Untitled Resident Evil Reboot. I feel like with what he does in these two, I'm confident he can do something interesting with it. Resident Evil can be really scary when it wants to, so hopefully he can bring some of those scares instead of just the pure campiness. Thanks for watching, see you on the next vid, bye!